A long-debated question among aviation historians remains: which propeller-driven fighter was the fastest of World War II? Today, we're answering that using verified maximum speeds in level flight drawn from official test data, wartime evaluations, and authenticated performance trials. These are the 8 fastest propeller fighters that actually took to the skies during the Second World War. None are prototypes that never flew or paper projects that existed only in the imaginations of engineers. Every aircraft on this list went into production, and most of them faced real enemy fire in combat. Their remarkable speeds were achieved through cutting-edge engineering, daring innovation, and the relentless pursuit of air superiority in humanity's most destructive conflict. Let's count down from number 8 to the fastest piston fighter that ruled the skies in 1945. Number 8. Germany's Focke-Wulf FW-190D9. With a top speed of 426 miles per hour, this aircraft, known as the Dora or Long Nose variant, marked a significant evolution of the original FW-190 series that had terrorized Allied airmen since 1941. The D9 replaced the earlier BMW Radial engine with an inline Junkers Jumo 213A, which required an extended nose, giving the fighter its distinctive silhouette. This redesign transformed the FW-190 from a rugged, low-altitude brawler into a high-performance interceptor capable of engaging Allied bombers at altitude and dueling on even terms with the latest American and British fighters. Production began in August 1944, and more than 700 units were built before the war's end. Luftwaffe pilots praised its superior high-altitude handling while retaining the superb roll rate and durability that made the FW-190 family legendary. In the desperate final months of the war, the Dora 9 fought against overwhelming odds in defense of Germany. Number 7. Britain's Hawker Tempest Mk reaching speeds of up to 435 miles per hour. The Tempest was an improved successor to the earlier Hawker Typhoon. It featured a slimmer wing profile and a more powerful Napier Sabre engine, transforming it into one of the Royal Air Force's most formidable low-altitude fighters. Entering service in April 1944, it arrived just in time to counter Germany's V-1 flying bombs. Its extraordinary speed at low levels made it the most successful V-1 interceptor of the war, with Tempest squadrons destroying over 800 of the pilotless weapons. RAF pilots discovered they could overtake the V-1s in level flight and either shoot them down or tip them off course using their wingtips. But the Tempest proved just as lethal in air-to-air combat. Its combination of speed, firepower, and agility made it a feared adversary to German pilots across Europe. In the final year of the war, Tempest squadrons racked up impressive kill ratios while supporting the Allied advance across Europe. Many pilots considered it the finest piston engine fighter Britain ever produced. At number 6 is the legendary Supermarine Spitfire Mk XIV, reaching 446 cm/h. This variant represented the ultimate evolution of the iconic fighter that had saved Britain during the darkest days of 1940. But the Mk XIV was a radically different machine from those early Spitfires. The key was the Rolls-Royce Griffon 65 engine, producing over 2,000 horsepower compared to the 1,000 horsepower Merlin engines of earlier marks. This massive power increase required strengthening the entire airframe and enlarging detail surfaces to handle the additional torque. The result was a Spitfire that could climb like a rocket and fight effectively at altitudes where earlier versions struggled. First flown in January 1943, the Mk2 entered squadron service in early 1944. It immediately proved itself against Thelatis German fighters and was particularly effective at intercepting high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft and the new German jets. The Griffin's power gave it acceleration that shocked German pilots accustomed to outrunning earlier Spitfire variants. Over 900 were built, serving with distinction until the war's end. Before we get to the top 5 fastest fighters, I'd love to know where you're watching from and which of these aircraft you think deserves the #1 spot. Drop a comment below and let me know if any of these rankings surprise you. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into World War II aviation, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Number 5 is America's Grumman F8F Bearcat, capable of 455 cm, designed as the ultimate lightweight carrier fighter. The Bearcat represented Grumman's attempt to create the most powerful aircraft that could operate from escort carriers, the small jeep carriers that proved so valuable in the Pacific War. Engineers started with the massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, producing 2,100 horsepower, and built the smallest, lightest airframe that could handle that power. The result was extraordinary. The Bearcat could climb to 10,000 ft in just 94 seconds, faster than any American fighter of the era. Its roll rate was phenomenal, and despite its small size, it packed 4 20mm cannons, or 6.50 caliber machine guns. The Bearcat's timing was unfortunate. It entered service in February 1945, too late to see combat in World War II. Only 24 had reached operational squadrons when Japan surrendered in August, but its performance impressed everyone who flew it. Test pilots call it the finest handling fighter of the propeller era. In the post-war years, it became the mount of the Blue Angels and set multiple time-to-climb records that stood for decades. At number 4 is Germany's Focke-Wulf Tuan 52H, reaching 469 mpn. This high-altitude interceptor represented Germany's desperate attempt to counter American and British bombers operating above 30,000 ft, where most German fighters struggled to perform. The TAI-152H featured extended wings spanning nearly 48 feet, a pressurized cockpit, and a Junkers Jumo 213E engine with a 2-stage supercharger. This combination gave it exceptional performance above 40,000 ft, altitude where most Allied fighters were gasping for air. At these heights, the TA-152H could outclimb, outrun, and outmaneuver virtually any opponent. But the aircraft arrived far too late. Production began in November 1944, and perhaps 150 were built before war's end. Few reached operational units, and even fewer saw combat. Those that died earned respect from Allied pilots who encountered them. On April 14, 1945, Oberfeld Webel Wilke, flying A-152 engaged 4 P-51 Mustangs at high altitude, shooting down 2 and damaging a third before escaping, a testament to the aircraft's capabilities. The TA-52H symbolized Germany's technological desperation in the final months. It was an outstanding design that arrived when Germany lacked the fuel, pilots, and infrastructure to employ it effectively. What might have been a game-changer in 1943 became a footnote in 1945. Number 3 is the Republic P-47M Thunderbolt, capable of 472 ft. This specialized variant of the famous Jug was built for one purpose: catching and destroying Germany's fast, high-altitude fighters and jets that had begun appearing over Europe in late 1944. The P-47M featured a specially modified Pratt & Whitney R28057 engine with an improved turbocharger system, water injection for emergency power, and various weight-saving modifications. These changes transformed the already fast Thunderbolt into a high-altitude interceptor that could engage German jets and reach speeds that shocked pilots accustomed to flying earlier P-47 variants. Only 130 P-47s were built, entering service in December 1944 with the 56th Fighter Group, the only unit to operate the type. The 56th had specifically requested a faster Thunderbolt to counter the increasing German jet threat. In practice, the P-47 proved temperamental. Its high-performance engine required meticulous maintenance, and early models suffered from severe engine failures that grounded the fleet for weeks. Once these problems were resolved, the P-47M proved devastating. It combined the Thunderbolt's legendary toughness and heavy armament with speed that could match or exceed virtually any German piston engine fighter. The 56th Fighter Group flew P-47s until war's end, racking up kills against both conventional fighters and early jets. It represented the absolute limit of what could be achieved with the basic P-47 design. At number 2 was Germany's extraordinary Dornier. Do-335 filed the arrow, reaching for 74 feet. This was unlike any fighter aircraft that flew during World War II, featuring a revolutionary push-pull configuration with engines mounted at both nose and tail driving separate propellers. The concept was brilliant. By mounting one Daimler-Benz DB6003 engine conventionally in the nose and another behind the cockpit driving a pusher propeller at the tail, Dornier eliminated the drag of wing-mounted engines while doubling the available power. The result was a fighter with straight-line speed that exceeded almost everything in the sky, combined with heavy armament and armor that would have made it formidable in combat. But like so many late-war German designs, the Do-335 arrived far too late and in far too few numbers. Development delays meant the first prototype didn't fly until October 1943. Production aircraft began reaching test units in early 1945, but perhaps only 37 were completed before the war ended. None saw genuine combat, though several were evaluated in high-speed trials that confirmed their exceptional performance. The Du-335 represented German engineering at its most innovative and most desperate. It was fast, heavily armed, and unlike anything else flying. But its complexity, late arrival, and Germany's collapsing industrial base meant it never had a chance to prove itself in battle. Allied test pilots who flew captured examples after the war universally praised its speed and handling, calling it one of the finest piston engine fighters ever built. Hadith arrived 2 years earlier. And at number 1, the fastest propeller fighter of World War II, the North American P-51 Mustang, reaching 493. This ultimate evolution of the legendary Mustang represented the absolute peak of American piston engine fighter design. The P-51 was a comprehensive redesign. Not just a tweaked P-51D engineers stripped nearly $1,500 from the airframe through lighter construction techniques, a redesigned fuselage, and removal of unnecessary equipment. They installed the powerful Packard 51 1650 and 9 engine, the American-built version of the Rolls-Royce Merlin, with water injection for emergency power. The result was a fighter that could nearly touch 500-meter fin-level flight. But speed wasn't everything. The weight reduction transformed the Mustang's handling characteristics. The P-51 rolled faster, climbed quicker, and maneuvered more nimbly than any previous variant. Test pilots called it the finest handling Mustang ever built. It retained the P-51's famous range, over 850 mph on internal fuel, meaning it could escort bombers deep into Japan while outrunning virtually any defender. Production began in February 1945, and 555 had been delivered by August when Japan surrendered. They arrived too late for combat in Europe, and while some reached the Pacific, none engaged in air combat before the war ended. But the P-51 represented what was possible at the absolute edge of propeller fighter design. It was faster, lighter, and more capable than anything else with a piston engine. In a war that drove aviation technology to unprecedented heights, the P-51 stood at the summit. These 8 fighters represent the absolute pinnacle of propeller drive and aviation technology. Each was designed during humanity's most desperate conflict, when nations devoted vast resources to gaining even the slightest edge in the air. The engineers who created these aircraft and the pilots who flew them stretched the limits of what was achievable with piston engines and propellers. What's astonishing is how minimal the gap between their top speeds was. Only 61 Liebherr separated the WWII in 8th place from the P-51H in 1st. Every single mile per hour resulted from endless hours of testing, gradual refinements, and urgent innovation born from wartime necessity. Each aircraft on this list stood as a triumph of design and craftsmanship that could decide the difference between survival and loss for those who piloted them. Speed, of course, wasn't the sole factor in aerial combat. Agility, firepower, endurance, dependability, and pilot expertise were all critically important. Yet in a conflict where mere seconds could determine fate, where intercepting an enemy bomber before it struck its mark could save countless lives, and where evading superior forces meant surviving to fight again, speed became the ultimate edge. Now you know the 8 fastest propeller-driven fighters of World War II, ranked by verified performance records. Disagree with this list? Believe another aircraft earned a place here? Share in the comments which fighter you think was truly the fastest.